Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it is Michigan Monday, even though Michigan didn't play. I'm starting to get the sense, Tony, we put out a call for questions, and we got approximately a metric poop load of questions back. So I'm starting to get the sense, Tony, there may be some interest in this year's Ohio State-Michigan game, possibly even more than a normal year. Your thoughts?
Well, I think once Ohio State fans saw the Buckeyes get past that Iowa hurdle, and once you get past Iowa, you beat Iowa, then you're thinking anything is possible. Now it's time to start thinking about Michigan. Now you can look ahead to Michigan's offense, having seen how well the Buckeye defense did against that Iowa offense, and now you have a frame of reference for what this defense can do against the Michigan offense. So I think that people are getting ramped up for this one.
Well, and I am already excited for the Tuesday morning show in which we're going to be talking about the Michigan game in the week of the Penn State game and all of the angsty tweets I'm going to be getting back about how I am about to curse Ohio State football, which, friends, let me tell you, if I had the power to override millions of dollars of college football coaches simply by hosting a podcast, well, sounds like maybe I should be getting paid millions of dollars. So if I have that power, well, I mean, we can. You pay me $1.9 million a year, like you're paying Jim Knowles. I will let you decide what I podcast about every day. So, but yes, I think the interest level is high enough that don't worry, we'll talk some Penn State this week as well. But feels like a lot of people are thinking Michigan already, and more are going to be thinking Michigan as soon as the Penn State game hits 0.
Tom, if you had that power, there's $95 million out there to Mel Tucker. There's $95 million out there to Jimbo Fisher. I think there's $80 million out there to Mario Cristobal. Is that too much? Would you maybe slash some of those, coaching jobs, or would you just lay waste to Iowa and just stay there spinning and spinning and spinning in Iowa City until there's nothing left?
I would want $95 million, but only if I get paid an NF tuck. That is my only stipulation. I need to get paid 100% in pictures of Mel Tucker's sneakers. If not, well, sounds like I'm going to go take my powers and go work for someone else.
All right, so yes, we do have a listener questions episode, or perhaps two coming up. We'll see how things go, but why don't we get started? Let's dive in. Let's start talking about what people want to know about and what only you and I can provide, I think.
All right, so first one from Fort Wayne Buckeye. Blake Corum gives me a lot of J.K. Dobbins vibes when I watch him run. Thoughts?
I can see that. I've never really, I don't know if I've compared the two of them too much. They're similar size, and now as I talk about, what Blake Corum can do, he's got great vision. He can go side to side, but he also gets forward. And it's like you say all of those same things about J.K. Dobbins. They both catch the ball well. I think J.K. was maybe more durable, but this is the first chance Blake Corum has been able to show how durable he is, and maybe he can carry the ball 300 times like J.K. Dobbins did in 2019. But I can see he's certainly a guy that they can ride for now and get the ball to as many different ways as possible. So I think there are comparisons are apt there. I don't know. Do you get J.K. Dobbins vibes?
It's funny. I was just thinking about Travion Henderson, and Travion Henderson kind of giving me J.K. Dobbins' career trajectory kind of vibes, where you had the really good freshman season, and the second year you're splitting time, and he's missed time. He's missed time with some injuries this year, and just hasn't taken that next step like you thought. And potentially, if he has, the trick to the J.K. Dobbins career arc is you got to have the third year, and we'll see if Travion Henderson has the third year next year. He was actually the person I was just thinking about in the context of J.K. Dobbins. Corum is interesting because I can see some parallels there, and they have run him real hard the last few weeks. So he is getting that J.K. Dobbins workload. The key there is, can you continue to hold up with that kind of workload, which is something of a great unanswered question. I think you're probably going to see him run a good bit this weekend against Michigan State. That Illinois game the week before the Ohio State game, that is not going to be a gimme necessarily. So you may have a lot of miles on him by the time the Ohio State game holds up. And he's someone who you have just heard about his work ethic from day one. His true freshman year, before he was doing anything on the field, he was someone who people around the Michigan program were talking about as, he's this just incredible gym rat and just constantly puts in the work. So that's the kind of stuff you've got to do if you want to be that bell cow running back. But that's just, there are a lot of hits that he's going to be taking between now and the end of Thanksgiving weekend. And, you kind of have to see how he holds up. But, this is, like I said, this is not the immediate, not the guy who I was immediately thinking of in terms of a J.K. Dobbins kind of career arc or game, but I can see it.
There's one other way I can see it, and I do see it, is they both have tremendous balance. When they get hit from the side, they just scoot over and then continue running. Like, you can't knock them down by hitting them, glancing them, because they both have the balance and the strength to stay upright. And I think Blake Corum gets north-south really quickly. And then, like I said, if you come in and you're not wrapping him up and you're just hitting him, you might knock him down. But generally, like, he's just going to keep going, or he's going to hit somebody else and then right himself and go up. So he's really, really good this year, and the vision is there. It's all there for him this year.
Yeah, the cutback, the vision and the cutbacks you've seen from him this year have been some real next level stuff. That has been a big reason why some of those, when they're popping 60-yard runs against teams, a lot of that is, they gashed Penn State a couple times for long runs, and part of that is Manny Diaz, and part of that is the vision from Corum, and I think Edwards might have had a long one in that game as well. Michigan has some good running backs, so that's going to be a real challenge, and something we probably talk about once or twice between now and Thanksgiving weekend. Next one from Maybe Buck Loves Bogey Inn. Tuck coming. Harbaugh has still not beaten Mel Tucker yet. Why is this so? Number 2, was Ryan Day really born on third base? So the first one, Michigan State's 2021 season was, that was a little bit of a, I don't know if it was a fluke, but it was a very specific confluence of events were required for Michigan State's 2021 season. I don't think I look at that as anything other than, Michigan State had a pretty good team last year. Michigan had a good team last year, and Michigan State throws everything in the world that they have into that Michigan game, because if they beat Michigan, it's a good season, almost regardless of what else happens. And so, and that's also a rivalry where you'll have some weird stuff happen sometimes, where it is the rival next door, and you're throwing everything into it, and you get those intrastate rivalries. You get some weird results sometimes, and Auburn almost beat Alabama last year, even though Auburn didn't really belong on the same field as Alabama for long stretches. That's kind of Michigan State. Michigan State has not exactly had Michigan's number, but they've beaten Michigan more than you would think over the last 10 years, 15 years. So I don't, I'm not necessarily going to look at that and say, boy, Mel Tucker has Jim Harbaugh's number. But if Michigan State wins this Saturday, then I think you start to have that conversation a little bit more.
Michigan State has won 10 of the last 14. Since Lloyd Carr retired, they've played 14 times. Michigan State has won 10 of those. The 2020 game in Ann Arbor, no crowd. So I think you put a crowd in there, that's going to be a little bit more difficult for Michigan State to pull it off. Say what you will about the Michigan crowd. 100,000 and 110,000 Michigan fans is going to be more intimidating slightly than the 600 fans that were in the stands for that game. So that makes a difference. Last year, it's a rivalry game. It's in East Lansing. You got Kenneth Walker. The first one was, I don't want to say it's a fluke. It had fluke tendencies. The second one is just rivalries with decent enough players, with decent enough motivation, and a scowl on a coach that you just can't beat. And so that's what Mel Tucker had going for him. That's what Michigan State has going for them. I don't know that they have that going for them this year, though.
No, this is definitely not the kind of Michigan State team that it was last year. And I think this is a very similar Michigan team, and maybe a better Michigan team than it was last year in some ways. 2020, you had the crowd. That was also not a very good Michigan team in 2020. They had a bunch of issues. They had a ton of injuries. I think if I remember correctly, both of their tackles were out for that game. I mean, and yeah, there was the Ricky White factor, which just, he just walked out of the cornfield and, appeared on the field and had 200 yards receiving or whatever it was. And then just as suddenly just like vanished into the mists. And I think we decided a couple weeks ago he was at UNLV now. You'll get some weird stuff like that. 2020, the whole 2020 season, I kind of just sort of hand wave as like, yeah, a bunch of weird stuff happened that year. And Indiana almost went to the Big Ten championship game. And you look at anything on either side of that, and it's like nothing around that suggests that should have happened. So I'm kind of willing to sort of hand wave that. Last year, I just chalk up to Michigan State had a really good team, and sometimes weird stuff happens in that rivalry. But then this year, this is a very, very, very big game for Jim Harbaugh. A very big game for Jim Harbaugh. Because if Mel Tucker loses the game, it's like, well, they've had a bad year. If Jim Harbaugh loses, then all of a sudden you really do get the questions about like, oh boy, that's 3 in a row. Are you ever going to beat Michigan State? And then next year, then you got to go to East Lansing, and you're getting the are you ever going to beat Michigan State questions, and that's when things get a little dicey.
Tom, I will say, shoeless Ricky White is not walking through that cornfield this time.
He is not, but it is not the. Would you be floored? I mean, just absolutely shocked if Michigan State won that game? Because this is one of these rivalries where I'm never completely shocked. Even when something bizarre happens, I'm never completely shocked at the result.
I will say this is my second favorite rivalry in college football, maybe sports, but this would be as close to shocking without being shocking, because we know the rivalry well enough to know, like, well, yes, this could happen. But I would be, I'm much more expecting a 52-7 than like a 23-20 type of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable, and 52-7 I think would really tell me something about this Michigan team. If it is 23-20, I don't know that necessarily changes anything I think about Michigan, as long as Michigan actually wins the game. Mm-hmm. But yeah, 52-7 would tell me something. I know you said Michigan State has won 10 out of the last 14. It would be interesting to know how many times Michigan State was favored out of those last 14, because it feels like, I don't know that I remember Michigan upsetting Michigan State, but I feel like Michigan State has probably upset Michigan 3 or 4 times during that span. So you can, if you have an opportunity to look that up while I'm answering the second half of this question, was Ryan Day really born on third base? I'm glad I'm sure you're relieved to not be the one answering this question. You are starting to see, I think this year is the year where the Urban Meyer has washed out of the program, out of the Ohio State program. There is really no more Urban Meyer in there. So this really is Ryan Day's program. So it feels like this is the year where you really are going to find out, okay, how much, is this Ryan Day sort of coasting on the fumes of the Urban Meyer era? Or is this, has Ryan Day really built his own program? Because this is a different program than it was at the end of the Meyer era. We were a long way from the days of JT Barrett in terms of, what this offense is and what this offense does. The defense is completely rebuilt. Pretty much, I think, entirely new coaching staff from the Urban Meyer era. Yeah, there's, other than Larry Johnson, there are no holdovers on the defensive side of the ball. And that's one of the ways that coaches put their signature and their stamp on a program is their assistant coach hires. And this is pretty much almost exclusively, not entirely, but almost exclusively, especially on the defensive side of the ball, a Ryan Day staff. And, I think this is the year where you really do find out if Ryan Day, we'll talk a bunch this month about, how this could be a very defining game for both Jim Harbaugh and Ryan Day. But it feels like if Ryan Day beats Michigan, goes to the college football playoff this year, and potentially, at least gets to the championship game, if not wins it, that's a Ryan Day championship. So, you can ask if he was born on third base or not, but, wherever he's standing at the end of the year, he got there himself.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that one as well. But, Tom, the answer to your question about how many times Michigan State has been favored in those 10 games or 14 games, 5 times.
Yeah, has Michigan upset Michigan State in any of them? I remember Michigan winning as favorites. I can't remember Michigan pulling an upset.
I can look through that, but since 2015, Michigan has been favored in each of those games. So let's see. Michigan was a 17-point favorite Michigan State was a 17-point favorite in 2014, and they won that one. So you're asking if Michigan has been a favorite and been upset?
No, I'm asking if Michigan State has been a favorite and been upset.
All right, let me run through these, which is fantastic podcasting. 2011, no. 2010, no, because let's see, 2009 they were a 4-point favorite. Michigan State was and won in overtime, 26-20, and of course 2008 they were like a 4-point favorite and won by 14 in Rich Rod's first year. Only a 4-point favorite. Ugh. So no. Wait, no, you're asking about Michigan being a favorite. Yeah, no. So none of that.
Yeah, because that's been my sense is that, sometimes Michigan State will pull an upset. And if Michigan State's supposed to win, Michigan State generally wins. But sometimes Michigan will lose games they're projected to win. That's sort of my sense, that Michigan State kind of comes in there and will spoil Michigan seasons in a way that Michigan doesn't really spoil Michigan State seasons. I guess the good news for Michigan is this Michigan State season is pretty much spoiled already. So I don't know that there's anything on the line there. So, this will be a throw the kitchen sink at it kind of game for Mel Tucker. And if you win, well, his first season, they won 2 games, but one of them was against Michigan. And I think every Michigan State fan exited that season with a smile on their face. So if he can do it again this year, that will forgive a lot of losses to Ohio State and whoever else they've lost to this season already.
Yeah, and I don't need to touch on the Ryan Day stuff. You did fine. You did okay.
All right, so we're going to be right back at the historical point spread data, and you did the research on this one from Ohio Bucks 1. How much historically has home field advantage really helped in the game? I imagine you can't really find lines from way back in the day, but for the last 10 years, has the home over? It says home twice, and I'm not sure. I think the second BBBQ is a typo. Has the home over or underperformed the Vegas line? There are a lot of gambling terms, and some of them are not being used in a gambling context here, and I really should have read this before we went on the air. Tony, take that word salad and make an answer out of it.
Has the home over or under or overperformed? Basically that's what we're asking. Over, under, done, that sort of thing.
Roger.
Yeah, basically over the last 10 meetings, which is the last 11 years, you have a split. Everybody is 500 at home against the spread. Ohio State is 2-2. Michigan is 3-3 against the spread. Now, I mean, we could look at the higher the spread, how did they do? But basically, no. I mean, home teams, yeah, you'd rather be at home. But as we know, Ohio State has controlled this rivalry and over the last 20 years, so doesn't really matter road or home for Ohio State, even though you look at where Michigan has won and it's been in Ann Arbor over that span. But I mean, it's over the last 40 years, Tom, Michigan has won in Ohio Stadium 96, 92, or is that 90, 92? Which one of those was the tie?
92 was a tie, so they won in 2000, they won in 96, they won in 1990, they won in 1988, they won in 1986, and I don't remember what happened in the 1982 game.
Yeah, so it's been a while. So that obviously favors Ohio State, and there's a lot riding on this one, as Tom was saying, and we'll get into more of that later on because there are many questions about who is this game more important for coaching wise, which I think there are plenty of thoughts on. That's honestly, if you wanted to really explore the room, that's an entire show in and of itself.
All right, here's another thing we could probably do a whole show on if we wanted to, and frankly, kind of did after the Ohio State Iowa game last weekend. Is there anything of note to glean from both teams' respective wins against Iowa? That's from the Dude Bex. I think there was stuff that I walked away from that Iowa game wondering about the Ohio State offense, where, if you can really just overwhelm the Ohio State running attack and you get you're really cramming guys up at the line and pressuring CJ Stroud and trying to jam up the run. Can CJ Stroud handle the pressure, get the ball out, get the ball to the playmakers in space? Because the playmakers are out there, and I don't know that I trust Michigan's secondary to just cover Ohio State's wide receivers one-on-one all day. That feels like that's going to not work at certain points. And, the stuff that you saw from Iowa in the first half of that game and Ohio State bogging down in the red zone. And, we talked a bunch about the fact that starting drives in the red zone kind of put you in a weird spot in some ways. So I think there are some concerns. I think I take more away from the Ohio State-Iowa game than I do the Michigan-Iowa game, because we've seen enough from Jim Harbaugh over the last couple of years that sometimes when they're playing teams that they know they can beat and that they know are not going to score a lot of points, I go back to like the Michigan-Rutgers game last year where Michigan looked just awful, just atrocious, and they couldn't run the ball and they couldn't pass the ball against Rutgers, and I think it ended up 20-13. And you looked at that and you went, oh man, Michigan's barely scraping by Rutgers at home. And then that had absolutely no bearing on what the Ohio State-Michigan game looked like, because Michigan knew, I think that was a game where Jim Harbaugh knew, you just, the old Milton Berle story, you just pull out just enough to win. That was like a Milton Berle game for Jim Harbaugh, where it's like, okay, we're just going just enough to get out of here. And I don't read a ton into Michigan only scoring 27 points against Iowa and Ohio State scoring 54. Because, the Ohio State had so many short fields and you get 6 turnovers. Eventually the dam is going to break with the Iowa defense. And Michigan wasn't trying to get, run up a big score towards the end of the game. It was just kind of like all right, get in, get out, get it back on the plane home and have a win. So, I take more from Ohio State's struggles against Michigan against Iowa than Michigan's, struggles or lack of 35 points etude against Iowa. What about you?
I'm just looking at the Michigan drive chart from that game, and their first 5 drives. Now, mind you, they had the ball 10 times, and the last one was just a kneel down. So they basically had 9 possessions. And so the first 5 of those, it's 75 yards, 35 yards, 54 yards, 61 yards, 67 yards. And I'm thinking Ohio State had drives of like 14, 1, 12, 24, all scoring drives because of the field position that I was giving them. But I would, and I'm trying to figure out how to write about what to write about for Michigan Monday this week. And I was going to do let's look at all of the common opponents that the two teams have faced and what they've done. And the problem is the only common opponent is Iowa. And it's really, I don't want to, dumb to base a bunch of opinions on what's going on against Iowa. It's foolhardy, but I do wonder what Michigan's running game would have looked like if Iowa had attacked it the way they did against Ohio State. And I say this not knowing entirely if that they didn't, but I think Iowa went into this game saying, we don't need to do anything special. We can do what we do. And no, we're not going to, we may win. It was a 2-score game in the fourth quarter. With the defense that Iowa has, they can make some plays. And if it's a 2-score game in the fourth quarter, Kirk Ferentz probably considers that a win. But they don't necessarily need to do anything special against Michigan, whereas Iowa felt we need to do something special against Ohio State. We need to send extra bodies to the running game and in order to disrupt it, or is this a thing where Iowa's thinking, well, we could send extra bodies against Michigan's offensive line, but it won't matter, that sort of thing. We don't have enough extra bodies to send the linebackers against 2 or 3 tight ends, so it's that wouldn't work for us. So maybe Michigan's offense automatically keeps that from happening, and it's hard to outnumber all of those linemen and that front without putting the rest of your defense in danger. But, Iowa had to play both offenses very differently, as you would, because they're 2 very different offenses. But, I think, I think the comparison angle will be more interesting after this weekend, after the Penn State game for Ohio State. We'll have more information there, but I want to look closer to see if there is anything really to glean other than I expected Ohio State to run the ball as well as Michigan did, if not better, against Iowa. But Iowa set out to make sure that didn't happen, and they didn't against Michigan. So to me, that's maybe the only thing that I can take from that is that Iowa was more concerned about Ohio State's offense, as they should be, than they were Michigan's. But also maybe they took Michigan's offense lightly, even though Michigan put up about 250 yards of total offense. So I don't think you can say that.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking at this from the Ohio State perspective, the thing that would be most troubling to me would be that they didn't run, Iowa set out to stop the run, and they were able to stop the run. But then Ohio State in the first half wasn't able to just go over their heads. If, the thought would be normally, if they're, playing 8 guys in the box or whatever they were doing on most snaps, you should be able to just throw over that, find one of your guys in space and let them catch and run and run for, a million yards. And that didn't really happen in the first half. And again, some of that was working in that compressed space of the, those short fields after all those turnovers where you have that 12th defender of the back line and you can throw 140 yards, but you're going to hit, you're going to hit a sousaphone if you're doing it from the 20-yard line. So there's some stuff there that I think would be a little concerning to me from the Ohio State perspective. But as you said, if Ohio State goes out and does to Penn State what Michigan did, even close to, I don't think they're going to run for 400 yards, but if they run for, I don't know, Tony, to just pick a number out of the air, 220 yards, and then they also pass for 220 yards, that would be an okay, wow, that's really a little bit of a statement. You're showing a balanced attack. Or if Penn State really does try to take away the run again, if Ohio State can take advantage of that and throw the ball downfield, because, Penn State has some decent, Joey Porter Jr. is a good corner, and the secondary for Penn State is not bad. So I think Penn State is going to struggle to move the ball against Ohio State. What'll be really telling to me is if Ohio State can kind of have their way with that Penn State defense, then maybe I'm not as concerned about that from the Ohio State angle for the Michigan game as I was coming out of that Iowa game. So next one from a learner one. I know threat level was another writer's thing, but what do you think the current threat level is for Michigan right now? I am definitely more concerned now than I was at the beginning of the year.
I don't know the actual levels. I believe this is an 11 Warriors thing. I don't know what their levels are for threat level. I don't know if this is DEFCON 1 or DEFCON 5. And I don't know whether our 1 is the threatiest level or if it's just the lowest. Like, if we do DEFCONs, are we doing it the right way or the wrong way? And do we even know the right way or the wrong way?
Yes, Tony, I know the right way. DEFCON 1 is the one where you're in the most danger. DEFCON 5 is the one you're in least danger. People get that wrong so often on Twitter or wherever, and that is one of my pet peeves. Is like, if you're going to use it correctly. DEFCON 1 is the bad one. DEFCON 5 is fine. All right, go ahead, Tony.
Using that, I don't know, DEFCON what 3 maybe. Like, this is a Michigan team that has danger all over the place offensively. Danger all over the place. Have shown that they can run the ball. Blake Corum might be the best running back in the nation. And so you have to be pristine in your tackling and your run fits, and you can't be late. And if you are late, you better wrap up as best you can, or at least slow him down so that a safety coming in can help. Like, he is very, very dangerous. I also, from decades of watching Ohio State, Michigan, there's always the bootleg to the tight end and, the second level stuff that will always be part of it. Like, it doesn't matter how bad Michigan's offense is, they will hit that. And it doesn't matter how bad their running backs are over the years, where it's like, like Fitzgerald Toussaint is like Davion Thomas, or like they're starting running backs and they have like no long runs against anybody. But there goes Davion Thomas, 4.8 40 running 48 yards up the left side. And it's like, well, that is Ohio State's not giving up a bunch of big plays right now, but I still think Blake Corum is going to hit one. And then I think you got a receiver that somebody's going to hit one. JJ McCarthy's going to do something, and he's going to make a play where he escapes for 25 yards or 30 yards or 50 yards, or escapes and hits a 50-yarder. So I think you're going to give up at least 3 big plays. And Jim Knowles has embedded 5 broken plays into his defense. Like, he expects that. And so he works with that. And that's just part of the game. It's the other 65 plays where if you lock down, you get stops on first down, you can withstand all that. So I think they're going to give up some big plays because Michigan, that happens. 2, they've got some good players. JJ McCarthy can make some things happen. But what is going on in the other, 60 to 65 plays? What's JJ McCarthy doing then? Is he checking it down? Are they even trying to stretch the field? So, DEFCON 1 being obviously, as we know, the highest of the DEFCON levels. I'm at 3 right now, although it's definitely gotten more DEFCON-y. It's like, especially, and maybe it was DEFCON 3.5 before that Iowa game, before the Iowa defense shut down the Ohio State running game.
Just to be extra pedantic, there are no halves, Tony. You have to pick a number. Sorry. No, I'm with you on, there's probably a little more concern from the Ohio State perspective now than there was before that Iowa game, because you saw the offense bogged down in a way that they hadn't really since the Notre Dame game. It's interesting to me that both of those were games where Jackson Smith-Njigba left halfway through the game or partway through the game. Is that a coincidence? Because that was also probably the two best defenses Ohio State has played. I think there might be a little bit of correlation there, but I think it also might just be those are the two best defenses Ohio State has played. You talked a bunch about the Michigan offense and what they're going to do, and I'm interested in whether the Jim Knowles defense holds up against Michigan, because this is obviously a much better Ohio State run defense, especially. So, if Ohio State can make J.J. McCarthy beat them, I don't think J.J. McCarthy can beat them. If Michigan can't run the ball, Michigan is not winning that game. I think Michigan's going to be able to run the ball enough to at least, keep themselves in that game. And then to me, just on the other side of the ball, I have questions about the Ohio State offense, how they're going to perform against the Michigan defense. Because one of the biggest areas where Michigan has outperformed my expectations is on that defensive line. That defensive front for Michigan has been way more disruptive than I anticipated. I thought they would take a major step back without Hutchinson and Ajabo, and they have really just it's been a different shape for the production, but the production has been great this year out of that defensive front. So if Michigan if Michigan's offensive line is able to kind of get a decent push and not necessarily, can Ohio State keep those linebackers clean against a much better offensive line? That's kind of one of my big questions going into this game. Can Michigan's defensive front be as disruptive as Iowa's was? And, at least that front seven. If you tell me both of those things, I'm at about a DEFCON 2. I don't think I'm quite there yet, but, I would say for sure, at some point earlier in the year, I would have said DEFCON 4, and now I'm at least at a 3 from the Ohio State perspective. And, if Ohio State looks sluggish again against Penn State this weekend in kind of the same way, or if Michigan just completely erases Michigan State this weekend, then, I think you could have that DEFCON 2 conversation. There is unquestionably, you can see the Michigan at least having a path to win the game in the same basic way they won the game last year. And, there are still questions to be answered. And, it's also entirely possible that Ohio State comes out and can at least just, if it's just sort of a stalemate on the offensive and defensive lines, Ohio State has better skill talent and wins the game. But I don't, the games, Tony, as you may or may not have heard Woody Hayes and Earl Bruce and many others say over the years, the Michigan game is won in the trenches. And I think there is a legitimate question about who is going to win in the trenches this year.
Yeah, if Ohio State struggles to run the ball against Penn State again, you can go ahead and move it to DEFCON 2, because, as we know, and we'll talk about it in later episodes, whoever runs the ball better, runs the ball more effectively between Ohio State and Michigan in that game wins the game. And you look at what Ohio State has done running the ball, they were back. They were running for 260 yards against Wisconsin and 280 against Toledo, but they were doing stuff that they hadn't done before. But then you look at maybe the two best defenses they've played, say Notre Dame and Iowa. Those are the only two games where they've been held under 5 yards a carry. Now, Iowa held them to 2.2 yards a carry, which is well below what we've seen in the past. And I can go back and, when was the last time a defense held Ohio State to 2.2 yards per carry? Less than that, it was Michigan last year. It was 2.1 last year for Michigan and 30 carries for 64 yards. So I think there's some flashback there. There's some, maybe some PTSD from some people dealing with not being able to run in either one of those games. And what does that mean moving forward? But I think, again, if they can't run it, and then, CJ Stroud, and I even wrote about it this yesterday, He's been really, really good. He's been fantastic. He's leading the nation by far in pass efficiency. But there are plays in each game where you're like, boy, that's not characteristic of him. But then you look afterwards and it's like, well, how fair is the criticism when he's the best quarterback in the nation statistically, efficiency wise, maybe QBR. I don't believe all of the ESPN made up statistics, but like, how do you, 68%, 69%, 70% completions, 280 yards, 4 touchdowns? Like, have we gotten so spoiled that now that is not good enough? For some, yes, because Tom, as I wrote, he did not take off and pick up, 7 yards on a scramble. Therefore, maybe it's time to look at Kyle McCord. But he needs to. I would like to see this offense dominate. That would maybe like, okay, he's the DEFCON talk. Like if the offense just goes out and dominates them in not the same way that Penn State did, but the same kind of you don't belong here type of thing.
Yeah, and I think you got people who just watch Ohio State or really just paying attention to Ohio State are looking at CJ Stroud and nitpicking him. Like Bryce Young did not have a good game last weekend. I mean that CJ Stroud is not the only quarterback who does not look quite the same when he has pressure in his face as he does when he has a completely clean pocket. That is pretty much everyone. So that I think people will look at CJ Stroud and go, oh man, well here are all these flaws with him. It's like, okay, everyone has flaws. Guess whose quarterback is completely perfect and never never looks flustered and never makes mistakes? No one. Everyone will do that. I think you will see that from Hendon Hooker at some point this year. You saw that from Bryce Young. You've seen that from DJ Uiagalelei. I mean, all these college football playoff contenders, you're going to have these issues. You see JJ McCarthy do dumb stuff all the time. I mean, it's just sometimes they get away with it, sometimes they don't. But it is a universal issue for pretty much everyone. So, if CJ Stroud just can kind of be, almost like the Jim Knowles thing, where it's like you're going to have 5 big plays that you're going to give up, and you sort of write that in, and okay, that's fine. That's the table stakes here, the price of doing business. If it's 1 or 2 throws from CJ Stroud, like, oh boy, that wasn't a great choice, or, wow, he really missed the open receiver. If it's 2 of those a game or 3 of those a game, as long as you're not pick sixes, I mean, not everyone is going to go 10 for 10 against Rutgers, Tony. That only one man can do that. So you've got to just kind of accept the fact that perfection is not a reasonable standard to hold anyone to. Excellence is, and you've seen excellence out of CJ Stroud often enough that it feels like, okay, it's in there. And it really would take a special performance from an opposing defense to knock him off of that standard.
Yeah, absolutely. That will then do it for this episode. Like I said, we've got many more questions to go. There are also some where if we don't get to your questions, or we don't, through this series of listener questions, if we didn't get to yours, it's because yours was very similar to somebody else's. So just claim credit for that one, because there's obviously some very similar thoughts and concerns and questions out there about this upcoming game. So thank you for joining us. Reminder, please check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Check it out for a month. See what you think. Check it out for a year. See what you think. You can find us at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle as well for videos like this one and highlights from high school trips that, Mark is taking and seeing Ohio State prospects, live streams that we do, that interview streams, all sorts of things like that. And of course, our post games, our pre games. Go ahead and subscribe on our YouTube page and then hit the bell to be notified when we go live so that you won't miss anything. So that will do it. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.